hands in the soil, the morning light, harvesting grains, what a delight. Join the fun, come this way. We're gardening with Grey.
All right, folks, so we're going to be talking about Everglades tomatoes, the elusive Everglades tomato. And the reason I say elusive is I've been looking for it myself for a bit of time, and I finally reached out to David the Good, who's been on the channel before, and come to find out his daughter has an Etsy account, and I ordered some seeds from her roughly, I don't know, 3 to 5 months ago, maybe a little bit longer. Once I got the seeds, a lot of folks have said that they're very hard to germinate. But if you can germinate these seeds and get them going, you'll have tomatoes for the rest of your life. So anyways, to make a long story short, I bought 3 packs of them, and I threw some in and tried to get them to germinate, and they did way better than my expectations ever could. So here, while I'm talking about the Everglades tomato, I'm gonna go ahead and throw up a couple of different things so you can see the kind of the stages of the Everglades tomato and where they're at now. And hence, usually like around February, usually we'll kind of plant them here in Florida, and then there's another month that you can kind of spread these things out. But once you get them planted here in my zone 10A, they're kind of a perpetual plant. They're really resistant to all different types of drought conditions, soil conditions, as well as they're very good at fighting off bugs and disease and whatnot. Now, these aren't like northern tomatoes out there. These tomatoes are more of the cherry variety. But they're very voracious once the plants get started and kind of set in your garden. So as you can see in some of those pictures, they did very well. I used a simple setup with a grow lamp, and they've been growing over the last couple of months. They're about 12 inches or bigger at this point, and I figured I'd put some in. Now, I did do a test run to see how they did in the cold weather that we've had here in Florida, and I'll show you the results of that. Now, being that we're in February, which is really the time to get these in the ground, is where I'm going to kind of put these in today and kind of show you that process. Also, for the folks that are interested, I will do a full garden tour, because we have a new bed in the garden from the last time you've seen me. We got some plants that are kind of ready to harvest, like our kale and broccoli and some of those other things. And we'll show you what we're trying to do here with our beds, is kind of build an ecosystem from edible plants to herbs and spices, as well as some other things as well, like medicinal plants. Learning a garden can be somewhat cumbersome when you first start out, but I suggest everyone get an opportunity to try to learn how to grow their own food. I think it's a wonderful experience, not only for yourself, but for everybody in your family. And if you're like me and you want to get a homestead eventually and build this homestead out, you want to have a kind of an experience on growing your own food. And what I mean by that is by trial and error. What grows well in your environment, depending if you're in Wisconsin, depending if you're in New York, depending if you're in Texas, you kind of want to give it a feel of what you can grow and what grows well in your environment. Again, like I said, I'm in Florida, zone 10A. So as you can see, these are about the size that I'm going to be transplanting into the garden. I've hardened them off. They've been outside here in a shaded environment for probably about 5 days now. Some people say a week to 2 weeks, but for some reason, I seem to get anything between 5 to 10 days, I do well. But you can see that they're looking pretty good. At least I think so. And yes, it is a bit windy out here, but it is a gorgeous day here in Florida, because we're roughly in the 60s, I think. And as you can see here, these things have gotten pretty big. They're, I said, a little over 12 inches now. Some of them range between 10 inches to about 14 inches in height. And they have a really great root system. So if you can see here, this root system is looking really, really good. You can see it's basically outlived the little solo cup that I transplanted them into when they were little seedlings, when I was kind of separating them out. But has a nice, really good root system, and I think it's going to work well in the garden. Now, that being said, if you plan on growing Everglades tomatoes in your garden, make sure that you have proper spacing, or if you're going to grow them wild, that's cool as well, because these things can get anywhere from what I hear. Like I said, this is just from what I've read. There's another lady that I follow. I think her name is Gidra's Garden. I probably mispronounced her name, but some of you folks may know who she is. And I've watched her, because she's kind of in my area as well and grows a lot of the plants that I can grow here in Florida. So one quick note that I like to add before we get into this process is there are a bunch of variety of tomatoes. Some folks are going to ask me, well, hey, Grey, are these things heirloom variety tomatoes? So from my understanding, and I could be wrong, I'm not an expert by any means. I'm never ever claiming that I'm a gardening expert. I just like to share with you my, my journey through gardening and some of the do's and don'ts that I've learned and some of the mistakes that I've made and some of the progress that I've made. But from my understanding, they're called wild tomatoes because they're not necessarily native to Florida, but some people have said that the Seminole Indians grew them. Someone said a bird flying from South America in the Peru region or whatnot flew over, dropped some seeds, and then, you know, people found them and yada, yada, yada. I don't know how much of that's factual. I would suggest everyone just follow up with some research if you're really curious about that. So there's kind of 3 tiers. Usually you hear of like these hybrid tomatoes or you hear heirloom tomatoes. And a lot of us folks like to grow organically and use heirloom type of variety of seeds and whatnot. But from my understanding, these are wild tomatoes. So there's a wild variety, there's an heirloom variety, and then there's the hybrid varieties that, you know, our wonderful government has put together for us. After we finish going through planting these Everglades tomatoes, I'll give you a little tour of the garden and what we have going on if you care to stay and watch that part as well. So as you can see here, my wife, this is kind of gives you a better idea. There's a whole bunch of branches on this one, and she's going to go ahead and take all those off to a certain height, so that when we plant it, again, the roots will shoot off the stem here and it'll look pretty good. So as you can see here, the plants that are already in there, I've had those in for probably, I don't know, probably anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. They went through some of the coldest temperatures that we experienced in Florida, as low as 28 degrees. And when I planted them, they were only about 6 to 8 inches. But it was kind of an experiment to see how well or how not well they did in that environment. So this is the one right here that kind of just fizzled and died away. It didn't do well compared to the rest. As you can see here, the wife is prepping this plant to go in the hole. And you can see the root ball on there is very nice. All right, so for you folks that kind of wanted to see the garden tour after we finished up going over the Everglades tomatoes, so you can see along this back line here, we'll go ahead and do that now. Also, I wanted to kind of show you our trellis that we got built here and how that's going to work itself out. I think as the tomato plants grow, as well as the beans here and the peas down there, I think this is going to make for a very solid trellis, and it should look pretty good, at least from my perspective. But as you can see, we kind of packed these Everglades tomatoes in there, and like I said, they'll all grow up this trellis, and we should have tomatoes just coming over this, and we should be able to pick tomatoes from here all the way around the top, and as well as the beans as they grow as well. As you can see, I forget which beans. I think these are pole beans, or no, sorry, they're yard long beans. That's what we stuck here on this side of things. And then we have some cabbage here, which is kind of like more of your bok choy variety of cabbage. I forget the specific name of it, but the wife knows, because she usually pays attention to this more than I do when it comes to certain things that she plants in there along some of the things that I plant. But the reason we did this is to kind of fill in this garden bed here, which I think looks great already. But the beans themselves are nitrogen fixers, as well as the peas down there. And of course, you have the Everglades tomatoes, or tomatoes in general, that are nitrogen hogs. So hopefully this will create a nice ecosystem inside this bed as things, progress moving forward. I'm going to walk around this side here. Are you trying to talk to the camera? Say hello. Say hello to everybody. All right. So let's move along the side here, and we'll come across to the peas. And believe it or not, folks, all these things have been doing very, very well. Even with the super extreme cold temperatures that we have here. As soon as they get a little bit taller, I'll be able to trellis them up this. Maybe I might even come down a pole and add a pole right here to get them going. I kind of got this other pole kind of high. But all in all, I think it should look good. But the garden, I think this should be a very cool bed here that we have here. Also, if you've been following me in my gardening adventures, you'll probably notice that we added these horseshoe, I call them horseshoe trellises, here as well. to grow things. We're wanting to basically think of growing grapes and whatnot up it, but for now, what we did is we went ahead and added, as you saw, a couple of these Everglades tomato plants in each corner. Got one down there, or two. We have two in each section to kind of push those guys up here along this. And eventually what we'll be able to do, if I swap around this way, is we should be able to have the tomatoes kind of going up and across this. And I think we'll just be able to reach up and grab some tomatoes all along this trellis, which would be really cool. Plus, aesthetically, if I move back a bit, and see if I don't trip over myself here. Once the garden comes into full bloom, I think this will be a very nice, kind of just a nice look, an overall look of what we're trying to build out here. All right, so let's move over and let's talk about some of the other things that we've gotten growing in our beds. Again, for you, some of you new folks out there, this is the wife's bed, and this is kind of like my bed. And I'll go over some of the different plants that we have in here because last time you saw us, it's been a while since we've done any gardening videos due to a lot of different reasons. But you also might notice this green fencing that we have here. And of course, that's because of our vegetable leader right down there. Yeah, he likes to get into the beds and kind of wreak havoc. So we try to come up with something that wasn't too intrusive and kind of blended it a bit. And that's what we came up with. The bamboo worked well for a while. But it started to degrade over time. All right, so we're going to start over here on this side of things, and this is some of our broccoli that we have growing here. And as you can see, it's probably some of it's ready for harvest for sure. You can kind of get close to this guy here, and you can see the size of my hand versus that broccoli head. So it is doing very, very good. I'm probably going to have to pull that tonight. Now this is a specific type of broccoli, and I'll throw that down so that you can see what I'm talking about, in case I missed it earlier. But once you cut off the head, this will actually shoot out sprouts off the side, and you'll get several other heads as well. But they have been doing good. Now, tucked away in here for springtime, or late spring as I call it, we also have some of these mammoth sunflowers here. Again, that's going to provide a really nice aesthetic to the garden. They grow really tall and they're huge. Seeds are edible and they just produce a lot. I'm thinking about even doing some videos on how to process that plant, because you can kind of consume the whole head of the mammoth sunflower, which is really cool. Okay, so this was an experiment we decided to do this year. We planted this as a small little plant back in December because we wanted to kind of see how a, like let's say a beefsteak type of tomato would do growing through the cooler months. And as you guys know, here in Florida, we've had some really, really cold temperatures, and we've kind of just let it do its own thing. We haven't really pruned it back or cut anything. We just kind of wanted to let it go wild. Again, it's actually surprised me through the cold temperatures. I think the lowest we've had here is about the 27, 28 degree mark. We did not get snow like the folks up north did in the Panhandle. Like I said, we're down here in the central Florida East Coast region. But usually I've had very little success with the full-size tomatoes, if that's what you want to call them. But all in all, this plant is doing pretty good. We've even started to get some flowers in here. I don't know if I can move this around here. If you can see the flowers down in there. And we also have some up top here, kind of right there. So we'll see how this thing pans out. The weather is warming up a little bit, but it's going to stay in that good range before we start seeing pests and bugs and diseases and all that stuff start to present itself. For you folks that have been following me for quite some time, I don't know if you guys remember my Cuban oregano plant, but that is what that is there. That's a Cuban oregano, and I put a couple of these in here because they did so well in our previous home, so we decided to kind of go that route again, because not only does it, you can use it for cooking and whatnot, but it has a lot of medicinal purposes as well. Usually we try to mix a lot of that in our garden: edibles, medicinals, herbs, spices, and so on and so forth, as well as these pollinator plants that we have in here. It needs to be cleaned up a bit there, as you can kind of see, but they do bring in a lot of bees. And of course, let's talking about companion planting. As you can see, the marigolds are just spreading out as they usually do. They're very gorgeous looking when they kind of pop like that. I really do like the way they look. But again, they help, deter pests and also bring in pollinators. We've seen all kinds of different, from wasps to honeybees and different type of predatory insects in this area due to the plants that we kind of add into our garden and whatnot. Funny enough, a little side story. See these guys down here? This is what happens when you're planting beans and it's a very windy day. And the beans just happen to take root. So we kind of put like this little metal trellis looking thing around here. It's a little fencing material that we have to kind of protect them from when we're mowing the lawn. But it's kind of an experiment to see if these actual beans would grow in Florida soil. So far, they're doing their thing, so we'll see how that goes. All right, so let's kind of move over here to this curly kale that the wife has going on over here. And it looks like it's just gone crazy, right? It's just very, very bushy, very green, very lush. I mean, it's amazing. The wife uses this for her smoothies, as well as adding it to certain salads and whatnot. She does a lot of cooking with kale, and this has done extremely well this year. Again, we planted this back in early November. She's harvested this thing, I think now twice, if I recall correctly. And it just keeps on growing back. And we're gonna keep on running it until it gets too hot and we can't grow it in again. Moving on down here, she has a couple leeks that she likes to add into certain dishes. She's tired of buying leeks at the store, plus she wants to know what's going into her leeks. And again, they were such tiny little plants at one point. And then down here, we have some of the spinach, and she's been harvesting the crap out of this here, as you can see, but it keeps on growing back, so that's always a plus. She has a method to her madness, as I like to call it. Interesting enough, folks, the folks that have been following me for quite some time probably know about the famous rosemary. I just call it the famous rosemary because it's the rosemary that keeps on ticking and ticking and ticking. This is one of the first plants that we put in here from a little start, and it just continues to grow and provide us with rosemary. And we use rosemary in a lot of our dishes, especially when we season it with fish and other soups and stews and whatnot. But some damage here due to the cold, but all in all, she's shooting off other shoots there, and it's just bounced off really quickly. So she's doing good. You'll also notice that a lot of times the wife will also put in different spices and herbs in her garden. And some of these things, like the oregano down here, is kind of like that ground cover, but also a nice tasty addition to our herbs that we grow here in the garden. We also got some English thyme. I think that is over here. There she is, doing down there. Something new that she wanted to experiment with this year. I didn't get a chance to record all the lettuces that she grew, but this is kind of the end of one of the lettuces. As you can see, it's at the end of its life cycle. You can see this one here has bolted. Even the temperatures have been really cool, and this lettuce is still bolted. So we always have to grow lettuce in the real cooler months of growing things. This one here, I think she said it's the romaine lettuce down here. And if you look at the leaves on this guy, let me move this camera this way. These leaves are very healthy, green. It's doing very well, this plant here. And she's harvested, she keeps on cutting it, taking leaves, and like I said, she uses it for all different types of cooking. This was kind of tucked in here. I think that is cabbage, if I recall correctly. It's either cabbage or cauliflower. Sometimes I'm not here when she puts certain plants into her garden, and there it is. So I think it's a little bit too tight, and she said she was thinking about trying to see if she can move it around a bit or clean it up, but we'll see. Only time will tell. Also, from our garden about 3 or 4 years ago, she finally got her chance to put in some Malabar spinach, and you'll see that this thing explode here in the warmer months. It's a type of spinach that loves heat. It can withstand drought and things like that. It's just very hardy in this area for us. Going back to some of our pollinator plants, you got some here, and you also got some of the purple ones down there. And unfortunately, I can't give you the names for them because she knows the names and I don't. I still have some salvia back there, that little purple salvia. I don't know if you can see that. I can get closer. Yeah, there we are. And the salvia will die off and then come back. The bees love that purple flower. Speaking of purple flowers, I moved this back over here. That is our Thai basil plant. As you've seen, the garden has always had some sort of Thai basil in it somewhere. Yeah, I see ya. What, are you watching me film? Just make sure you stay out of the garden. Birds. But the Thai basil will bounce back, and I'm already seeing new growth on it. And bees seem to really love the Thai basil. So if there's any beekeepers around here, which we have found several in the area, some of their honey is going to be flavored with that Thai basil because they're always in here, especially early in the morning. All right, the sun is getting lower, and I want to wrap this video up by saying thank you all for joining me on my gardening adventures. I always truly appreciate the folks that follow my garden videos. I know the channel doesn't get many views on the gardening content that I do, but I love gardening. So I like to share my experiences with you folks. Now there's some folks out there, I've already reached out to JT. She's local, and I will get some plants to you whenever we can kind of meet up. Anybody else who's local here in my area, most of you folks know who you are, who have asked for either some seeds or whatnot, please let me know down in the comments, and I'll write your name down, because once these plants start producing, I will have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of seeds. All I ask is you pay the postage or reimburse me on postage. I don't know. If you're local, I'm just going to give them to you. So either way, if you're local, I can also give you some starts, because I said I had great success in regards to germinating these seeds that I got from David the Good, or David the Good's daughter. Outside of that, folks, I hope you have a wonderful day. God bless every single one of you amazing people out there. And again, thank you for watching this video. And remember, you are not alone.